So
That was a really good omelet, though. That one bite that he force-fed me. That doesn't make any sense! Brave star, strength of a bear, speed of a puma, brave star, brave star!
Hey guys, welcome back to another interview here on Toned In Entertainment, and I'm doing an interview today with someone who probably doesn't need an introduction, Mr. Chris Van Vliet.
Wow. Well, you can introduce me if you want.
Okay, well, it's Chris Van Vliet, interview to all the wrestling celebrities around the country.
Yeah, and people might not know this who are watching this, but I know Tony very well. We're actually co-workers.
Yeah, we've been on a few adventures together. I mean, I've gotten stung by bees for you.
Yeah, so in my other life, my day job is I host a TV show here in Miami called Deco Drive on Channel 7. And yeah, Tony's my cameraman, an awesome dude and an awesome cameraman. And I'm doing this segment called Keeping Up with Chris, where we go out and do these fun local adventures. And I mean, what have we done? We were beekeepers, we swam with sharks, or swam with alligators, we drove a tank, hang gliding. What other things have we done?
We've rode the highest swing in America, right?
That's right. I went to trapeze school. Yeah, it's been crazy. And you've been along for almost all of these.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually put on that air pressure tank and we've gone down in the water and I've got like stingrays swimming around me and eels and everything else. But I do it for this guy. We do it for the video and we make stuff happen each time.
Well, I thank you for that.
So, of course, so, you know, it's always a pleasure to go along and do like fun, adventurous stuff along the way.
The funny thing is, like, when I line up these stories, you're not really involved when we're setting them up. So I'll text you and be like, hey, Tony, are you free next Friday? And you'll be like, yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, we're going to be, whatever ridiculous adventure we're going on. I also got to try out with you for the Dolphins, the Marlins, the Miami Heat, and the Florida Panthers.
That's correct. We've done a lot of just like sports and adventures, and now we're going to talk wrestling today, which is, I think, what everybody, when they hear Chris Van Vliet on YouTube, they think wrestling. And that's where we're going today.
It's the funny thing that, like, I've been in TV for 15 years, and I've had a YouTube channel now for 8 years. I know a lot of people have only found it in the last maybe 6 months or 12 months. After the Chris Jericho interview in the backseat of the car, I know that's the one interview that everybody saw. But yeah, TV is like the main thing, and wrestling's always been my passion. And now we kind of get to like mingle the two together here with those were almost Scott Hall fingers, but now they are.
You know, the funny thing is that I remember actually last year when we were going to go shoot a Keeping Up with Chris, we were in the car driving to Orlando from Miami, a 3-hour drive, and we're just talking wrestling, we're talking stuff, and I said, Chris, you know, there's a convention coming up. There's the NWO event. You didn't really know much about it. I just happened to find it, told you about it. And it's funny because I've seen the evolution of your channel in just a year.
Yeah.
You called the guys that were running it and you're like, hey, I'm Chris Van Vliet. I have a YouTube channel. You had to kind of explain everything. And now you've got guys like Rhino and The Miz and wrestlers from all over the country messaging you, asking you to come to them for an interview.
Yeah, it's been so crazy how this has all worked. I've had a couple wrestlers reach out to me and go, hey, the next time you're in whatever town they live in, can we do an interview? And I'm like, yes. Like the Rhino one was like, Rhino called me up on a weekend and was like, hey, I'm leaving WWE. I want to get my story out there before, you know, the dirt sheets like make up their own story. Actually, Rhino still is under contract technically, even though like a masked man who looked like Rhino did a spear at Slammiversary. That was Rhino, by the way. His contract's up on July 17th. So like 2 months ago, he calls me up and says, I hear you're the best. I want to get my story out. I want to tell my side of it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to fly to Detroit tomorrow. And we just like, boom, made it happen like that. And it's been so cool. Like I'm a crazy hardcore wrestling fan. And to have someone who I looked up to when I was a kid calling me and like leaving a voicemail for me was like, what world is this?
Yeah, because I remember you telling me, you're like, hey, Rhino just messaged me. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then a couple weeks ago, you're like, Cody Rhodes just messaged me. I'm like, Cody Rhodes, AEW, Tony Khan.
Yeah.
Like, all these guys are messaging Chris. It's not the other way around anymore.
Well,
for the most part.
It's still a lot of the other way around.
Okay.
Still a lot of me sending messages and getting no response and be like, what do you mean? But why? I see you read that message. Why aren't you responding to me?
That's always a kind of a disheartening thing when you've seen that they've actually sent the message, because I know I've sent a couple messages myself, and I'm like, well, you read the Facebook Messenger message. Where's my response, you know?
And I'm not going to name names here, but I had an interview lined up at Double or Nothing with a very big star, and they were like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And I said, great. We'll figure out, the where and the when I land in Vegas. So I landed in Vegas, texted them, no response. Called them, no response. Emailed them, no response. So I'm like, well, this is weird. Maybe they're busy. So then I waited till the next day, and I'm like, hey, today's the day. We got to make this happen. Text, call, email, no response. So then I reached out to them recently. I said, hey, did I do something wrong here? We were supposed to do this interview, and it didn't happen. Oh, yeah. Sorry, man. Got busy with some other stuff. It's hard not to take it personally, but I was like, you said yes. Why aren't we doing it?
Speaking of Las Vegas and AEW, you were at the show at Las Vegas. The energy level we were watching here on TV. And as a fan watching inside of this couch, we were sitting here on this couch watching AEW. My girlfriend and I, neither one of us wanted to even get up to go to the bathroom while we were at home. Let alone, I can only imagine being in the crowd in Las Vegas.
That was so crazy. I always say that there's a real big distinction between WWE fans and wrestling fans. And that arena was filled with wrestling fans, hardcore wrestling fans that were ready to explode at anything. So I did have to go to the bathroom, of course, halfway through. And I waited till the 1, 2, 3 on, I can't remember what match, somewhere in the middle. They were all so good. And I said to my buddy, I'm going to run. And I literally ran up the steps, peed as fast as I could, and then ran right back down. I'm like, I ran back in as Awesome Kong was making her entrance. I was walking down and I'm like, oh my God, Awesome Kong's here. What a show that was.
Right, because I think that was probably the second match of the main card, because they had the buy-in, they had a couple matches, a Battle Royal, and I think that was the second match of the main card, so you kind of got it in there early before all the good stuff came on.
AEW,
or the better stuff came on, I should say.
It was all good stuff.
It was all
You're
good
right.
Stuff.
Yeah, and just got incrementally better as the night went on. AEW is doing something special here. And, I'd be very interested to sit here in a year and talk about, where things are at. Right now, everyone's super excited. AEW is changing the world, is what everybody's saying. AEW certainly changed the landscape of wrestling, but they've only had 2 shows right now.
Yeah.
They're going to have another one this Saturday, as you post this, but right now it's still very, very young. The cool thing here, though, is WWE has started to look at it and go, oh, we got to make some changes.
Just a little bit. They've noticed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because we went to Fyter Fest last week, and we are going up this week for their next show up in Jacksonville, and it's just being in that arena and just loving wrestling, there's just something about watching AEW and just feeling the energy that they're not filling you with just talking, and they're getting, pardon the pun, total nonstop action when you're watching AEW right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I'll be there as well. Fight for the Fallen. I'm going to be at All Out as well. So if anyone watching this is going, say hi to us. Yeah, both Tony and I.
We'll both be out there. Yeah, definitely.
It's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan, and it's an exciting time to be in the business if you're a pro wrestler.
Who do you think becomes the breakout star in AEW?
I think the breakout stars are already there. Hangman Page is either going to be the first champion or one of the first champions. MJF, you just say that name and everybody has an instant reaction about him. I know I personally do. He's not a very nice human, but that's okay.
So it's not just a character that he's playing on...
It's a character. It's always... That's who he is.
Right.
Yeah, that's MJF.
Don't worry about it. I'm not going to try to force feed you anything here while we're here. I already fed you before you got here. So we're not going to get the lady to come and knock on the door, and I'm not going to eat in front of you, and we're going to enjoy this interview here. So
that was a really good omelet, though, that one bite that he force fed me. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, we were watching that video. We were kind of cringing throughout the whole thing. It's we could feel your pain just in your facial expressions during that interview.
I can confidently say I will never have another interview like that in my entire career.
Probably not,
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to a little WWE right now. Now, your first WrestleMania ever that you attended was in Toronto. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the most iconic WrestleManias at the time. Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan. were you Team Ultimate Warrior or were you Team Hulk Hogan at the time?
Well, my first WrestleMania was the next one in Toronto.
Okay.
WrestleMania 18. At the time, though, to answer your question, I was always a Hogan guy over Warrior. I loved Warrior, but Hogan, I mean, come on. You grew up eating the vitamins, saying the prayers, you know, and being a real American, even though I'm Canadian. Then WrestleMania 18 was the first one I attended in person. My favorite match of all time. Rock, Hogan. You want to talk about electricity in a building. Yeah. My God, that was insane being part of that. Like, Rock was supposed to be a good guy. Hogan was supposed to be a bad guy. And the crowd completely flipped. And I remember telling Rock, my very first interview, I said, so this was right before WrestleMania 28. So I said, hey, 10 years ago, you had my favorite match of all time. And he's like, oh, yeah, with Hogan. Who are you cheering for? And I said, I was cheering for Hogan. And he goes, me too.
Yeah, I think the entire crowd was Team Hollywood at that pay-per-view. Yeah.
And what was cool was I told the same story to Hogan recently. And he goes, oh, man, that crowd, brother, was so crazy. And he says brother all the time, even like in real life, off camera. And then he told me this story that he didn't know that the NWO was going to turn on him after that match. He said the ref told him to stay in the ring and stay down, and he didn't know why. And then out of nowhere, Hall and Nash came out and beat him up. And he thought it was weird that the ref was asking him to stay in the ring because he was the loser in that match. Right. So he stayed in the ring, and then it all made sense. And then the next night, he was red and yellow.
He was red and yellow because I thought it was kind of, to be honest, it was a little lame that Hall and Nash kind of just came out there and kind of turned on him. But in retrospect, it was for him to kind of go back to red and yellow and go back to kind of his roots again.
Right, because what was he going to do? Be super cheered in Toronto at WrestleMania 18 and then the next night be a heel again as Hollywood Hogan? It just wouldn't have made sense.
Right. So I think that was maybe like a Vince McMahon decision, almost like on the fly or like last minute almost.
It absolutely was. Hogan said he hadn't worn red and yellow gear in like 10 years or something. So Vince McMahon gave him his private plane.
Right.
After that, he flew down to Tampa where he lives, basically went into an attic, grabbed a box full of red and yellow stuff, hoped it would fit, and then took the private plane back to Montreal in time for Raw.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, speaking of Vince McMahon, I know I watched your interview with Alicia too, and I know that she asked you the question, like, who would be your main person to interview, and it was Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
If there's a wrestler that, has, no longer around these days, that you could have interviewed, 10 years ago, that's no longer with us, who would be the one person you would like to actually sit down and interview?
I don't think that Chris Benoit got enough love during the time that, I think that people, loved the character, and then obviously, the very unfortunate circumstances with him and his family. I'd love to have an interview with him, just talk about his technical wrestling background, the way he grew up, the amazing people that he wrestled with, and he's a fellow Canadian as well. It's obviously so incredibly unfortunate what happened. It's just sad, and we don't really know all the details of what happened there, but a conversation with Chris Benoit would have been really fascinating.
That was one of the probably the most tragic things I've seen, and a lot of people didn't really give Chris Benoit the credit for the wrestler that he was. And I have to tell you, honestly, Sting's my number one guy, but I'm a WCW guy, and Chris Benoit was my second favorite wrestler of all time. And, when we heard about his death, it was very sad, and it was like that Monday night when they announced it, it was very tragic.
Sure.
But then when we found out the incidents of what happened with the family, it's like, it's hard to even watch a Chris Benoit match anymore because it's like you get that thought in your head of what happened and what went on with the family there.
And this is why I'm saying I'd rather have an interview with him in 2005 or 6.
Before 2007,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So, that's not part of the conversation. Obviously, you can't say Chris Benoit's name now without having that be part of the conversation. But if in a perfect world, or in this, this made-up world that we're creating.
We live in fantasy here sometimes.
Yeah, so in this made-up scenario, it'd be 2006, I'd be a better interviewer than I was in 2006. But yeah, it would be with Benoit.
Yeah, because I know you recently interviewed Vicky Guerrero and you asked her about him going into the WWE Hall of Fame, and she thinks he should. I know he's never going to go into the WWE Hall of Fame, and I would actually kind of feel a little cringeworthy if he kind of did, because just knowing the circumstances, but at the same time, I don't like the fact how they, on WWE Network, they show the Radicals, and they zoom in, and they completely eliminate him, he never existed. I understand not giving him any more credit or bringing up his name. I completely understand that, but I don't think erasing him from the past or scratching his name out of the main event where he won the world title is the right thing to do either.
Well, I just think that they don't want to be linked to that, tied to that at all. Especially, like, what an embarrassing situation for WWE, where they paid tribute to Chris Benoit.
On that Monday night, yeah.
Right, on that Raw, you know, they had to kill the Vince McMahon storyline, no pun intended, after Vince McMahon blew up in the limo. Right. Like, that was a huge storyline at the time. Like, that storyline was so big. People don't realize this. That storyline with Vince was so big that investors actually thought Vince McMahon died, and the stock started to go down. Like, it was crazy. Like, people called the police because they thought Vince McMahon blew up in this car, and then 2 weeks later he shows up on Raw and breaks character. And like, I think that WWE obviously wants to distance themselves from the seriousness of this crime that was committed, but they also want to distance themselves from the fact that, like, you know, it made them look really bad.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the most tragic things I've seen happen. But let's go on to a brighter note, because we don't want to get all gloomy here on Tone In Entertainment. And we're going to switch the subject just a little bit, because Tone In Entertainment is a pop culture related website. So let's talk about cartoons, okay? I'm a Thundercats guy.
Okay.
Grew up in the 80s. He-Man, G.I. Joe. What would be your one cartoon that little Chris Van Vliet was watching when he was growing up?
Little CVV loved a show that you probably never heard of. I'm sure you've never heard of it, called Brave Star. Star with 2 R's at the end. And if anybody knows this, I want to give you like the best high five ever. He was like a space cowboy. And I still remember the theme song. Brave star, eyes of a hawk, ears of a wolf. Brave star, strength of a bear, speed of a puma. Brave star, brave star. There you go.
See, I'm going to say you're the only person that in this world that remembers that, but then I'm going to get comments saying, no, I was a Brave Star fan, so I'm not going to go there.
I will be very impressed if someone knows who Brave Star is.
Yeah. Is there one album of all time that it's just like an album that you could put on and listen to over and over again without even like thinking about it?
An album that meant a lot to me growing up, because like you and I were part of the era that went from cassettes to CDs.
Correct.
And one of my first ever CDs was Green Day's Dookie. And I was like, I just loved it, like start to finish with the secret song as well. That's an album that, like, when I put that on now, like When I Come Around and Basket Case, just like, that's a great album.
Okay. Now, I asked a couple wrestlers at River City Wrestling Con about their favorite guilty pleasure, and I got some pretty interesting answers. I got a Rebel that said Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Okay.
Kelly said Cruel Intentions.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite guilty pleasure movie?
I mean, I love Back to the Future. My favorite movie, like, of all time. And I just love the concept of it, too. Like, I love the concept that one little thing that you do today could completely change your future. And that whole concept, like, really gets me every single time. So it's guilty pleasure, also / best movie of all time.
Right. Because I said The Goonies. You know, okay. and they're like, oh, but The Goonies is a classic. Yeah. It's not really guilty pleasure movie. Like, I think a guilty pleasure for me would be the movie The Wizard. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
Oh, yeah, wow.
You know, the little kid, he's going to the Nintendo Championships, and he wants to play Super Mario Brothers 3. It's just, nobody would ever say that's their favorite movie of all time, but I could put that movie on and just kind of enjoy it anytime, you know?
I really liked Freddie Prinze Jr., like, remember his movie Summer Catch?
I never saw Summer Catch.
Okay, and you really have no need to see Summer Catch. But I played baseball growing up. I played baseball from like age 4 to like 24. So I loved baseball. It was a big passion of mine growing up, along with pro wrestling and broadcasting and fishing. I love fishing as well. So Summer Catch and like FPJ, he's my man. And FPJ wrote for WWE.
He did. He was a writer for a while. I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. I wonder what Freddie Prinze Jr. is up to nowadays.
That's a great question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he survived it. I Know What You Did Last Summer, didn't he? Can he come in another one of those movies?
Now they're going to reboot it or
something? I think they should. Did he survive in that one? I don't
know. Did he?
I can't remember, God. I know Jennifer Love Hewitt survived, and that's all that really matters.
That is all that matters.
Nobody really cared if Freddie Prinze... Maybe he can make a She's All That Part 2. We could see that.
Oh, that's a good film.
Yeah.
That's a good film.
You know, I have actually a VHS copy signed by Rachel Lee Cook.
Wow. Oh, I see it. It's right there.
It's actually right over there.
you have a very impressive display of items in here.
Yeah. Now let's go back to wrestling, because that's what everybody wants to really hear about. Is it time for WWE to only have one world champion?
Oh my God, yes, 1,000% yes. I'm not a big fan of the brand split, and I've gone on the record to say this many, many times. And I get why they have a brand split. They have way too many superstars to just have them all, wrestle on all the shows and get the exposure that they deserve. But when they first did the brand split, it made sense that the champion went on both shows. Try to explain the fact that there's a brand split right now to someone who doesn't watch wrestling. It makes no sense. This is how it sounds. Well, this guy's the champion, but his belt's black, and he only wrestles on Tuesdays. And this guy's the other champion, but his belt is red, and he only wrestles on Mondays. That doesn't make any sense!
But what makes it even make less sense is that Kofi Kingston's on Raw almost all the time. So you've got two world champions running around. And again, anybody that has hey, I got to watch AEW. Let me check out Monday Night Raw. I haven't watched it in years. Okay, who's the world champion?
That's the thing that's so confusing here. I'm super happy for Kofi. I'm super happy for Seth Rollins. That's amazing. But which one's the champion here? They can't both be the champion. Right. Which belt holds more weight? I would have to guess it's the Raw belt, but the Raw belt's not the world title. The Raw belt's the universal title. It's just very confusing. And I think that as wrestling fans, we take a lot of the things that don't make sense and just go, yeah, it's okay though. And I just think there's bigger picture things like this. Like when you explain it to someone who's not a wrestling fan, it just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And you're right, because we kind of just accept it. It's well, this is what McMahon does. And he is the king of the wrestling world, and he kind of doesn't have to, he can play by his own rules. But I'm hoping with maybe a little competition here, it's going to get serious, because I'm thinking AEW is going to have one world champion.
They are.
They're going to have a tag team champions and maybe a women's championship or something like
women's
that.
Championship, probably a women's tag team. And then I would have to guess, they haven't said this, but I'd have to guess they then have their version of a US or Intercontinental.
That mid-card title, right. Okay, which would be very nice. Now, you have a video up with the Young Bucks that you just did with at Florida SuperCon this past weekend. They were pretty close to signing with WWE, weren't they?
And it's crazy to hear them tell this story. They basically, this was a year or two ago when your option was WWE or, work it on the indies.
Or Impact at the second level, if anything.
Right. And they said that they were in conversations with WWE, and they were like, well, I guess we're going to go there. And then we're like, but you know what? We don't want to work this many dates. So they called them back and said, yeah, thanks for the offer, but we don't want to work this many dates. And they basically said, how many dates do you want to work? We'll make it happen for you. They were bending over backwards to make this happen with a very lucrative deal. And that's when Tony Khan came in and said, I want to start this company. And if that hadn't happened, or if the timing was off by just a couple months, we'd be watching the Young Bucks right now on Raw and SmackDown.
Or probably on NXT. I think they might have just put them through the ringer like they kind of have done with Samoa Joe, and a couple other guys. I don't think they really bring too many people right into Raw from the indies. I mean, not usually. It's usually NXT. I think for the most part, of course, there's a few guys out there, but it's guys like Joe that were very well known. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. AJ Styles, I think, went right into the brand, but most of the guys that come in go to NXT, and then they get lost in that shuffle of Raw and SmackDown. So, me, for one, I'm happy to see the Young Bucks where they are.
Yeah, and you're right, though. AJ's the only person that had success elsewhere that went right into the main roster and had success. Because look at all the other guys who were world champions in TNA. Austin Aries and Bobby Roode and Samoa Joe and they really haven't done a lot. No. So AJ Styles has kind of broken that mold.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely relieved, because I think the landscape of not having the Young Bucks in AEW would have been kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and I mean, they're playing a really big role as executive vice presidents as well. So they're not just in the ring. They're working a lot of the things behind the scenes and pulling a lot of strings.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions I have here today. And so I want to thank you so much for joining me for a little wrestling chat. It's always good to
thank you.
Talk wrestling and some pop culture and everything like that.
This is like our drives to the crazy adventures, except this time there's a camera here.
Yeah, I love it. There's not much difference. I mean, this is what we do when we have a 3-hour drive somewhere. We're just talking wrestling. So now we're doing it for everybody else right now.
And it's always such a pleasure to talk with you and hang out with you and to work with you, because I know when we work together, all the shots are going to be in focus and the audio is going to be good and everything like that. So when I'm like, yes, I get to work with Tony Miller, today's going to be a good day.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Guy. Thank you, Chris. And guys, make sure you subscribe here to Tone Entertainment for future videos like this.
Do it.
Subscribe to the channel. Do it. Go now. Do it now.